Okay, so today we're going to use our autonomous AI agent to build a user interface. It's going to be React with Redux and TypeScript and Material UI. The way that we're going to go about this is we're going to run the Spring Boot Microservice that the AI produced last time. We're going to go grab the Open API Schema. So that's like a big JSON file that says what all these methods are that are available on the API and then the schema of the model that's associated with it. Uh, then we're going to feed that to the AI agent, and we're going to say, build a React UI using this schema um, as the thing that you want to interact with. So it's going to take that as input. It has a reference project for this design pattern, and then it's going to take those two and build them. One thing that's important here is there is an init script that has to run. There's dependencies that have to get populated when you create a React project. So this goes ahead and does that. It's a pre-canned script, so there's no, the agent, when it executes it, it's not taking its output and feeding it into it, so there's no risk of like injection into the shell. It's fully executed within a function that is written in the extension itself, so it's safe from that perspective. So a couple of things that show up when you're doing stuff in JavaScript or TypeScript is you kind of have to reference every file as a dependency. This happened in Python too. So you can see hooks.ts there is red because it needed to import a file called store.ts, which hasn't been created yet. But store.ts has other dependencies, and so this is kind of the only natural chain of logic when you're using this pattern. It's probably better to try to redesign the files so that there can be like a monodirectional dependency flow. That way the bot is always grounded. It always has that symbolic context to the project, and it can reference those symbols to produce everything else that it needs to. In this case, the design patterns for this are such that like the trade-off of letting the bot see something it's more familiar with versus extracting this out into a linear dependency chain, the bot behaves better when it sees something it's familiar with. So cool thing now, we're building the actual component. So this is not just the business logic and all the state management interfaces, but this is going to be the markup itself. The agent does a surprisingly good job at working with the markup. XML is kind of unwieldy. Anybody who's ever really worked with it will tell you that. The thing that it will do very occasionally is produce an extra closing tag. So you kind of have a opening tag and a closing tag. And when it produces an extra closing tag, everything turns red, the whole thing breaks. The linter spits out 1,000 problems for the file. And then even if you have the agent try to debug it by looking at those linter messages, it doesn't matter because the error messages that it produces give you no clue, really, that that's what's happening. So frequently that requires like manual intervention. This problem is really hard for people to solve too, when there's like this dangling XML issue and then your error handler doesn't show you anything about the problem that's relevant. So project is done rendering the code now. Just goes through a quick thing to load all the files, just make sure everything's working. We're going to look and see hooks.ts is still red, but store.ts is there, so you know it's probably fine. We're going to just go ahead and run it, so no modifications manually made to the code necessary here. This ran fine on the first attempt. Just going to load it up in the UI here. We're going to take whatever it gave us, look at it, run it through, and then we're going to make sure that it's actually calling our running microservice, just to validate that we truly have like a full stack here generated by the AI fully autonomously. So we run the create, we see it updates in the UI. Again, all this JavaScript, all this logic, etc. That's what was just produced in the application. Create, update, delete, they're all working there. So we'll go back, we'll check the logs. It's going to be fine. You can see all the SQL queries show up in the logs. Next time we're going to work on adding more complex requirements, interviews with the customer about all that.